Hey, what is up ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sonic the Hedgehog here, and I'm from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our redo let's play of that familiar Wii U game that we might as well able to actually get this thing started potentially. So even then, before we start with this let's play off, we're about to be watching the opening cutscene, number 1. Nice little sweet CGI opening, by the way. So even then though, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our redo let's play of Sonic Lost World, specifically for the Nintendo Wii U version, because do you remember back in 2013, I'm presuming that Chip and Kamek did manage to able to tackle the 3DS version of the game by the actual original let's play of the game, but the reason why we're about to be doing a redo let's play of Sonic Lost World for the Nintendo Wii U version of this let's play is because, well, back in during the likes of in 2013, I did manage to done this before, but the quality itself is somewhat average, but a little bit too pixelated and especially a little bit fuzzy. So as a result though, hopefully the quality itself should be a lot more better than before, and also my commentary is a little bit too quiet for my liking. So even then, hopefully it should be a lot more better than any forms of how it does on 2013 version, even though it's no longer in existence anymore, just because, well, with some DLC included in here and there, like 2 Nintendo DLC pieces here and there, and seems more accurately enough is the fact that this game, not only does it came out on the 3DS as I said this before, and also they did manage to came out on the Nintendo Wii U, this game also came out on the PC version, which I'll explain more details onto this, but first of all, let's get started with the first cutscene.
Critters, Eggman!
If you insist.
Whoa, that's harsh! You'll have to swing back around for it.
Predictable. Carrot. He must really love those things.
We're hit! Whoa! What's that in the clouds?
That must be the Lost Hex. Cool!
Less looking, more landing!
All right, I can land this, but it's gonna be bumpy.
And just like in Sonic Colors, and especially noticeable for Sonic Generations, and heck, even with the forms of Sonic Forces, we immediately start things off with the first level from the get-go, rather than just getting interrupted with the forms of some sub kinds of sequence or something like that. So even then, the first level we're going to be run into in this game, and that is the forms of Windy Hill Zone Act 1. In this case, we are approaching onto the first zone in Sonic Lost World, and that is the forms of Windy Hill Zone, which is fundamentally though, although I'll explain more details on that specific stuff later, because even then, let's get to the actual main core gameplay mechanics of this game that plays remarkably different from the boost formula from Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, and before Sonic Forces came around. This game doesn't have a boost formula this time because it sort of may actually feel like comes back into the Sonic Adventures roots again. But now for the differences between the forms of how it does it on the forms of any other Sonic games is that, as you can tell, Sonic actually performs himself as a run button, which even then, by simply able to actually just to perform a run button, assuming if you play this on the Wii U version, is that you have to able to hold down the trigger button, specifically the ZR button, because if you don't press that button at all, basically Sonic, whatever he does, he just does like a little bit of an awkward jog, which even then, that way he always just some sort of like walks in a little bit of an odd way fashion. So even then, as far as you can tell by the forms of Sonic Lost World already, is the fact that, well, ever since when it first announced it back in May 2013, which I cannot even believe it's been about 6 years since when this game was first announced, and even then, speaking of which, it did first came out on the Wii U and the 3DS version about roughly the same day, on October 2013, you know, kind of like the same thing for how it does it on Sonic Colors for, both for the Nintendo Wii and Nintendo DS, that did master came out on the exact same day between the two versions, which did master came out on the November the 12th and stuff. So, speaking of which, this is my first step of the actual playthrough so far, so, yeah, that's a great start. But anyways though, because the only problem with this is at the moment, at this point right about now, I'm obviously know what I'm doing, but the problem with this is the fact that I haven't really played this game for about, I would say for 5 years ago actually, since last time I've touched upon this game. So even then, as a result, I apologize if my gameplay experience wasn't exactly as strong as far as I remembered. So hopefully without any sort of like rubbish experience altogether, all things considering. So even then, that's as far as I can most likely concern about this. So anyways though, and as you can see on the actual footage, as you can see right there, Sonic actually performs himself his new ability, which is usually calls it the parkour system, which either way, if you manage to if you manage to hold down the run button down, you can able to actually cling onto a wall and stuff. That way you can able to perform a parkour move, which either way, sometimes you can able to actually run into the actual wall, or in some cases you can able to actually walk onto the wall and stuff, which is specifically noticeable on the 3D sections, but on the forms of the 2D sections once in a while, that we might actually come across some of these 2D sections later down the road. But even then, I was not getting to mention things too much, because as you can see, we got ourselves these returning items ever since in Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations, and even especially noticeable for Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2, we have ourselves the returning of those red star rings, and much like the forms of how it does it on Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations, there are about 5 of them in total. But even then, do you remember back during the likes of in 2017 about the fact that we did manage to done the redo Let's Plays of Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations on that exact same year in 2017? That normally we couldn't be bothered to able to actually just to get ourselves the red star rings in every single level. Well, it turns out I'm actually going to be doing slightly different to the table, because I was also able to mention about this whenever we get to the next act. Because we have ourselves the returning color powers, because even then, if you remember from Sonic Colors, and especially a brief moment in Sonic Generations on Planet Wisp for the console version, and especially noticeable for the Tropical Resort from Sonic Generations on the 3DS, we have ourselves the returning Wisps. And just like in those two games, basically you're able to actually give you a certain color abilities that are based off from what abilities they represent. Like for instance, some of these Wisps do seem to make a return. Like you can see on the very beginning of the first level, although I will mention more on that details until any second or two. But even then, to finish off the main level is the fact that you need to able to break the animal capsule. But you know, just like in the old days, ever since in Sonic 1. So yeah, that was about it for Windy Hill Zone Act 1. So even then though, very simple and easy level if you manage to get used to with the actual main mechanics of this game, but you know.
Take it easy there.
Oh, stay calm, little guy. Sonic and Tails will get your
We're on,
buddies
okay?
back. Sonic,
No, it'll be
did you
alright.
get those animals back from Eggman?
Just the one container he tossed off his Eggmobile.
Wait a minute, just the one? Weak. I would have gotten them all back by now.
Save the rest of them.
What? Let me go.
Oh, I hate to think what Eggman's doing to those poor things.
I'm on it.
I will say, for the actual Wii U game like this is the most gorgeous looking Wii U games I've ever seen. Way more better than the forms of how it does it on, let's just say Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, for example, that the the later game that usually came out after this game was being released. But even though, let's not mention about that terrible Wii U game for any time soon. So, and when you finish up with the first zone, you're able to actually have an option to able to actually have the Miiverse on. But let's just say this right now, if for those of you guys who already know about this, is that the Miiverse support is dead at this point. So, this meaning about the fact that you can't able to actually receive items across the world, and even especially noticeable that if you're ever first time playing this game, for those of you who've ever experienced the, well, let's just say the main difficulty part about the game, which I'll explain more details until whenever we get to the future zones. But even then though, let's just move on to the forms of, before you start things off with, the next act in Windy Hill Zone, here's the forms of the circus portions of certain hub worlds and what have you. So even then, it's only exclusive to the Wii U version because as far as I'm aware, the PC version does not contain these circus tents because the actual circus sequences really usually utilizes the gamepad function because that's the reason why I'm playing this on the Wii U version. Which I was going to be able to play this on the PC Steam version, but obviously, I don't able to actually access to Steam though. So, but either way though, all you really have to do is just basically you need to able to like, well, depending of what tent you're in, they actually offers you a different sort of like moving objects you can able to play around with, which will you'll see why until in the future zones. But in the Windy Hill Zone, it's very simple and easy because all you really have to do is that you have to use your Wii U gamepad stylus to able to actually move the trampoline, and then you can able to actually let Sonic able to bounce all the way up from that trampoline segment. So yeah, and the main purpose of the actual circus tents are used for is the fact that once you keep on popping those balloons from time to time, you would able to actually able to rescue one of those animal flickies and stuff like that, which I'll explain more on that later because now we're about to be moving on to the second act of Windy Hill Zone. Steve Veneno, let's see how this will plays out to be. Steve Veneno again because of the Miiverse is dead, so you know.
Transformation 101. Bunnies to badniks. Boom! Instant army. It needs to be a big army if I'm taking over the world below.
You are quite the mighty Congo.
Yes, I am. I conquered you, didn't I? And with your help, I'll not only rule the world, I'll finally destroy that blue nuisance, Sonic.
Eggman wants the little hedgehog destroyed.
Yeah, well, I feel like destroying something.
That's what I like about you, Zaz. Always ready for a fight, even before you know what you're fighting.
You bet! Bring it on and I'll rip it up!
Win or lose, I'll learn something about our enemy.
So yeah, for this cutscene right there, not only do we able to see Dr. Eggman once again, but this time he actually got himself his new enemy army for his hands, and that is the forms of, well, we'll explain more on that as soon as we're able to continue on with the story so far. So even then though, let's move on to Windy Hill Zone Act 2, where basically for the majority of this level is going to take place in a 2D section, which either way, this means is that I said this before about the fact that in most of the levels of this game, we're able to actually offers you to able to actually explore the majority of the levels in 3D sometimes. Whilst most of the time though, some of these levels will actually brings into the 2D action once in a while. So even then though, that's as far as I can go for that consideration because, you know, just like in Sonic Unleashed, Colors and Generations, and especially noticeable for Sonic Forces, that, normally we get ourselves these, most of these levels for like this once in a while. So even then though, yeah, that's as far as I can really try to explain about this at this point, folks, apart from the fact that we actually stumbled across a new Wisp type, which not only do we actually see the returning Wisp from Sonic Colors, which is usually a silent Wisp, which basically functions the same thing for how it does it on Sonic Colors, but except the fact that we actually know onto the Wii U console. So there's a new Wisp introduced in this particular game, and that is the forms of the Asteroid Wisp, which basically every time you actually transform into the actual asteroid, you can able to actually manipulate your momentum with the actual pressing down the jump button and stuff like that. But once you release it and just trying to let go, then the more heights you can able to actually just jump from it. So even then though, actually I really don't mind about the forms the Asteroid Wisp that much, because even then, it's somebody feels a little bit more useful at some points, but most of the time though, that I feel like the jumps themselves can be slightly sluggish most of the time, but it's a little bit more subconsciousness or something like that. But I'm not exactly sure how do I supposed to explain that, mind you. Even though this game did manage to able to utilize the actual gyroscope controls most of the time, especially on the Wii U gamepad. But even then, though, that was back in the day, that was in day one. So here's the first boss in Sonic Lost World. We have ourselves this new foe right here, which as far as I can tell, his name is Zaz. And he's the member from the Deadly Six, which that's as far as the actual news enemies is actually called, according to the actual promotions and advertisings and all that stuff. Now, these basically simple and easy, but as you can see on the actual lock-on reticle, as you can see, I managed to perform a charged-up homing attack, which the longer you would able to actually let the homing attack extended onto, you would able to actually deal with the massive homing attacks. Even then, though, definitely recommended for you able to do that, especially noticeable if you actually come across into several boss fights in the future. So even then, I think that pretty much does it for Windy Hill Zone Act 2, which even then... Oh yeah, by the way, you know these red star rings are continuously grabbing for the previous zones? That way, it will be able to actually unlock the actual circuits tents for the main zones. So even then, though, that I will be able to actually play those from time to time at some point or another. But anyways, let's move on to Windy Hill Zone Act 3, where basically it's going to take place entirely in 3D, and it's going to be inside the Catherine sections. So even then, if you can tell by this point already, is the fact that for those of you who have seen the gameplay footage of this before, you might be something is a little bit more awfully familiar for those of you able to actually notice for like, you know in the first zone, in Windy Hill Zone Act 1, usually Sonic goes from planetoid to planetoid. Yes, because this is actually a lot like the forms of, well, I would say very similar actually, as the forms of Super Mario Galaxy / Super Mario Galaxy 2. Because of this, though, Sonic usually goes for, like, in some levels anyway, though, Sonic may actually able to actually go from planetoid to planetoid, meaning about the fact that he constantly going on to the actual different portions of the actual level, because usually some of these platforms or some of these sections in most of the majority of in each zone in this game will actually becomes like separate or something like that. But even though I haven't really explained about this properly though, because it's been a long time since I actually played the Wii U version of this game, because I did manage to play the 3DS version from time to time, and let me tell you right off the bat though, I despise the 3DS version of this game so much, because it just ruins it for me. So anyways though, let's just go ahead and smash this little crystal stuff right there, and as you can see, Sonic managed to able to perform himself some sort of a very similar to the bounce bracelet ability from Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, where basically you can able to actually just manipulate the bounce bracelet attack, and then you would able to actually use that to able to not only just trying to able to bounce onto something, but it's also usually be helpful for able to actually access to these different small areas. So even then, like the actual red star ring, for example. So even then, as I said this before about the forms of the actual, like, oh yeah, this is the actual Silent Wisp you're gonna be seeing right about now. Oh yeah, the annoying part about this is just the fact that every time you actually finish with the actual Wisp powers, sometimes you need to able to press the A button, assuming if you're able to actually continue things onwards. So even then, I understand they actually do that, is because, you know, back in Sonic Colors or something like that, after when you finish up with the actual Wisp power-up, then you weren't able to actually just to finish it instantly, rather than just able to actually go to a complete stop. So, generally speaking, you get the idea for that. So anyways, let's go over there to able to get ourselves the next red star ring. Yes, I said this before, I'm going to be going after every single red star rings for the sake of this let's play, and I accidentally died right there. Yeah, the annoying part about the parkour system sometimes is the fact that I swear I did manage to able to actually just trying to able to run up to a wall, but sometimes the game expects me to tell me about the fact that I can't do it properly. So, and speaking of which, when it comes to the game's new mechanics and all that stuff, well, I say the actual main mechanics of the actual game, the game, usually for the sake of the Wii U version, I'm pursuing the PC version as well. The game doesn't do a very good job of how teaching how things work sometimes, even with some stuff you're familiar with, or especially noticeable if there are some techniques you've never even learned to perform. Like, for instance, for example, that if I don't do the parkour system from the very beginning, every once in a while the little hint bubble actually showed up from time to time, and you need to able to actually stop what you're doing, and able to actually utilize this with the Wii U's gamepad on the touchpad, That way you can able to actually learn some more actions or what have you, which to me feels like a pace breaker to me. Because unlike the 3DS version, which it handles the hint bubble system a lot more better, because even then, at least in that version, that it tells you about the actual simple controls a lot more easier. But in this version in particular, you have to able to actually go to a complete stop, and then you have to able to keep on looking at the Wii U gamepad and just tap it onto the actual hint bubble until you're able to actually, the game tells you how you're supposed to play the game properly, which even then, I managed to stumble across the actual parkour system by complete accident without even like activating a tutorial segments from time to time. So that's why many people seem to get some little bit of a criticism with this game, especially noticeable if the entire gameplay itself is remarkably different from the boost formula from the past, so you probably get the idea for that. So anyways, let's go ahead and open up the actual animal capsule, and we're about to leave things from this point here. So even though I can assume that in each zone it actually contains 4 acts, so it might be slightly shorter than the forms of how it does it on Sonic Colors, but at least in Sonic Colors, they did manage to offer you 6 acts and a boss in each of the zones. So even then. And yeah, by the way, we actually unlocked the actual 4th act in Windy Hill Zone, and in order to actually unlock that act, is that you need to keep on collecting those flickies, which either way, that's the most important part about this game, because even then though, you might as well find things out until later on. So even then though, onwards to Act 4.
Hey, I've been looking for you, Baldy McNosehair. Who are your friends?
Friends? These are nobody's friends. They are the Deadly Six, and they are your worst enemies. Zaz, show this blue pest how you do things up here.
With pleasure. I've been itching for a fight all day.
I think you're itching because you need a bath.
Are you disrespecting me?
Maybe.
I'm gonna mess you up!
I'd love to stay and watch him disassemble you, but I have business to attend to.
I know the perfect spot to take care of you.
That's funny, because I know the perfect spot to kick you.
Alright, here we go, on to Act 4 in Windy Hill Zone, in this case the final act in that particular zone. Now, when it comes to the actual world themes in Sonic Lost World itself, it's going to be a little bit more traditional, because as you can tell, Windy Hill Zone is not only based off from Green Hill Zone all over again, but it's not. It's like a different variation of that, or it's entirely a new zone, mind you, because even then we are going to go from planetoid to planetoid, which basically in each world of the actual, like in Sonic Lost World, it usually takes place in the Lost Hex, which actually represents like the actual hexagons all over the actual tiles and stuff like that. So that's pretty promising, all things considered. So even then though, as you can tell that we actually did manage to bump into not only Eggman again, but also the Deadly Six is actually introduced. Like for instance, we've already come across into Zaz from Act 2, but now we need to fight against with him again, but this time on a different act. Because of this though, in each of these zones, most notably Act 1 and 3, this is a very simple platforming sections and all that stuff, or the actual main platforming standard stuff level. But in the forms of Act 2 and Act 4s, basically you're able to actually fight against one of those Deadly Six members. Even then though, we've already taken down Zaz from Act 2, but now we need to fight him again on Act 4, but with a different stipulations. So even then, that should be self-explanatory for the majority of the time, especially noticeable whenever we get to the future zones of this game so far as well. So yeah, you probably get the idea for that solution right there. So even then though, I will admit though, is that the actual background music of Windy Hill Zone looks very, very damn catchy if you ask me, especially noticeable on that. Well, I'm very glad that the fact that, well, that in particular world were able to actually inspire one of those stages in Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo Wii U, and also same applies for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate recently, and also not to mention without the fact that that particular music will be playing, which is of course Windy Hill Zone, has been playing through on Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo Wii U, and especially noticeable for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as well. So even then, that's a pretty sweet stuff. But I digress. So yeah, what happens if you do manage to collect all the red star rings, you're probably wondering, specifically in one zone, or in this case in each zone, or in this case for this measure in each world? Well, as I said this before, if you manage to collect every single of those red star rings, specifically all 5 of them in each act, well, it doesn't matter how much acts you're actually able to win in, you can actually able to unlock yourselves these Circus Tents, which by the way you can able to grind some more flickies in here and there and all that stuff, assuming if you're able to unlock the later levels down the road. But even then though, aside from that though, there's also a different reward if you manage to able to gather all these red star rings in each of a zone. Which, either way though, I'll explain more details as soon as we finish this stage first. So, yeah, you probably get the idea for that. In fact, back in during the likes of when this game was first released, during the likes of in 2013, I felt incredibly bad for most people back in the day. They seem to able to get themselves a little bit of a tiny complaint about the forms of Sonic Lost World sometimes, is the fact that, well, you know the extra lives, specifically that I've already got one right there. Now, you're normally able to actually collect the Sonic small heads, or the Sonic icon heads, until you're able to actually get your extra lives from, which is very self-explanatory, you know, just like in Sonic Generations usually does that, and especially noticeable for Sonic Unleashed, and especially noticeable for Sonic Colors, and you name the rest, except Sonic Forces, because Sonic Forces doesn't have a life system, you know. So, but either way though, that... actually, I'll explain more on that whenever we get to the next video, actually, because at this point, that we're actually gone towards the very end of the level, because as you can see, we're now getting chased by the forms of Zaz, and he's actually carrying this, robotic moon of all things, and then once you get towards the end, you have to face off against with him for the second time. See Fernando, and just like before, we need to build up with the homing attack, charge up thing, and then once you've done so already, then you would able to deal with him just fine. So, to be expected, it's the first boss in this game, so not that much of a challenge whatsoever. Until later on anyway though. So, and I think that pretty much wraps things up with Windy Hill Zone Act 4, and that also same applies for the actual zone itself. See Fernando, and before you're able to end things off at this point, we got ourselves another cutscene.
Alright, we good to go or what, Tails?
I've built a TV out of paper clips.
Yeah.
And reprogrammed a supercomputer using dishwashing detergent and a toothpick.
I know.
So look, fixing a propeller on a biplane, that's about as difficult as taking a nap.
Okay, I didn't need your whole life story. A simple good to go would have been cool.
All right. Good to go!
Cool!
So yeah, that's basically how this goes. It's a very simple and easy world if you manage to able to get used to with the main mechanics of the game, so you probably get the idea for that. So, if you manage to get gathered all of the red star rings in each of the acts in the one zone specifically, we actually get ourselves the returning Chaos Emeralds. See, even then, once again there are 7 of them in total, and unlike the 3DS version of Sonic Lost World, in order to actually get the Chaos Emeralds in that particular version is that you have to participate in on special stages, which even then, whereas in the Wii U version is that you need to gather every single of those red star rings in each act in that particular zone, you know, per world. So, yeah, I guess we'll end things off at this point right there, so join me next time on Let's Play Sonic Lost World for the Nintendo Wii U, is the fact that we're about to continue on and exploring through the next world, and that is the forms of Desert Ruin Zone. See you for then, see you guys next time. Later, fellas.